My nurse sister diagnosed me as a failure to our family, so I gave her a career-ending prognosis. I grew up in a household where needing medication meant you were fundamentally flawed, and only perfect daughters deserved unconditional love. While my sister Rebecca basked in our parents' adoration for saving lives at Denver General Hospital, I was drowning in my freshman year at Colorado State University, desperately trying to make sense of lectures that might as well have been delivered in ancient Greek. Our family operated on a simple hierarchy. Rebecca, the golden child in scrubs, stood at the apex while I scrambled for scraps of approval at the bottom. Every family dinner became a shrine to her medical heroics, how she'd resuscitated a cardiac patient, comforted a grieving family, or mentored struggling interns. Meanwhile, I sat in silence, my academic struggles dismissed as laziness or lack of discipline. The turning point came during a particularly brutal organic chemistry lecture. I'd read the same paragraph about molecular bonding 17 times, the words swimming on the page like tadpoles in a pond. My heart hammered against my ribs as other students scribbled notes effortlessly, while I fought just to stay present in my own body. That afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to visit the University Health Center. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, listened as I described the fog that had clouded my mind for as long as I could remember. The constant feeling of being 2 steps behind everyone else, the way simple tasks felt like climbing Mount Everest, the exhaustion that came from trying so hard just to appear normal. "Hazel," she said softly after a series of evaluations, "you have ADHD. This isn't your fault, and it's absolutely treatable." For the first time in months, I felt hope bloom in my chest. The prescription for Vyvanse, those distinctive blue and white capsules, felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. Within days, the world came into sharp focus. I could sit through lectures, complete assignments, participate in discussions. I was finally becoming the student I'd always known I could be. But Rebecca had other plans for my newfound success. Thanksgiving arrived with all the warmth of a dental procedure. As our family gathered around the mahogany dining table laden with turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce, Rebecca launched into her latest professional crusade with the enthusiasm of a televangelist. "I'm so concerned about all these college kids abusing stimulants these days," she announced, her eyes boring into mine across the Waterford crystal glasses. "Especially those extended-release ones, you know, the ones that last 12 hours and come in those distinctive blue and white capsules." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. She knew. Somehow, she knew exactly what my medication looked like, down to the specific colors and duration. Our parents nodded along sympathetically, completely oblivious to the psychological warfare unfolding before their eyes. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of panic. Had I left my medication somewhere she could find it? Did she search my room during my last visit home? The questions swirled through my mind like vultures circling carrion, and Rebecca's satisfied smile told me this was only the beginning. As I helped clear the table, her whispered words sent ice through my veins. "We need to talk later, little sister. About your study habits." By Christmas, Rebecca had transformed our family gatherings into my personal purgatory. She'd perfected the art of the indirect attack, weaving her poison into seemingly innocent conversations about her noble work at the hospital. Every story became a weapon aimed directly at my secret. "You wouldn't believe the zombie-like kids I see in the ER," she'd say during Christmas dinner, carving the honey-glazed ham with surgical precision. "These Adderall and Vyvanse addicts stumble in, completely dependent on their drugs just to function like normal human beings. It's heartbreaking, really." Our parents hung on every word, their faces etched with concern for these anonymous troubled youth, never suspecting their youngest daughter sat among the damned. Mom would shake her head sadly while Dad muttered about participation trophy generation and taking the easy way out. Rebecca's campaign intensified through the winter break. She'd corner me in the kitchen while I made coffee, launching into detailed descriptions of college students she claimed to treat, kids who become legal meth heads, she called them, their brains fried from pharmaceutical amphetamines. The worst part, she'd say, refilling her mug with the expensive Ethiopian blend she'd brought home, is how they convince themselves they need these drugs. They create elaborate stories about invisible disabilities, manipulate doctors into writing prescriptions, all because they're too lazy to develop real discipline and study skills. Each word felt like a scalpel cutting into my newfound confidence. I'd sit there, my hands trembling around my coffee cup, while she painted a picture of everything I'd become in her eyes, a weak, drug-dependent fraud who'd chosen chemicals over character. The cruelest twist was how my medication had actually begun working. My grades improved dramatically. I'd made the dean's list. I'd even joined the debate team and discovered I had a natural talent for public speaking. But Rebecca's relentless psychological assault made me question everything. Was I really just a junkie in denial? Had I taken the coward's way out instead of pushing through my struggles like stronger people did? Her words burrowed into my brain like parasites, feeding on every moment of self-doubt I'd ever experienced. New Year's Eve brought her most vicious attack yet. During our family's traditional game night, Rebecca regaled everyone with a story about a patient she'd allegedly treated the previous week. This dramatic little college girl came in claiming she'd spent 6 hours trying to read a single paragraph, Rebecca said, arranging her Monopoly pieces with deliberate care. 6 whole hours on one paragraph. Can you imagine? She was practically in tears, begging for stronger medication because she couldn't concentrate. Our entire family erupted in laughter. Uncle Tom nearly choked on his beer, while Grandpa Joe slapped his knee and declared, 6 hours on one paragraph? That's not a learning disability, that's just plain stupidity. But my blood had turned to Arctic water in my veins. Those were my exact words. The identical phrase I'd used just days earlier when calling Dr. Martinez's office for an emergency appointment, explaining why I was failing my Victorian literature class despite taking my medication regularly. Rebecca couldn't possibly know those specific details unless someone was feeding her information. As the family continued laughing at my expense, Rebecca caught my eye and smiled, a cold, calculating expression that promised this was far from over. The realization hit me during a particularly sleepless night in January, as snow fell silently outside my dorm window at Colorado State. Rebecca couldn't have known about my specific struggles, my exact words, or my medication details through random chance or casual observation. Someone at the University Health Center was betraying my trust, feeding her information that should have been protected under federal law. The thought made my stomach churn. Every appointment, every vulnerable moment where I'd opened up about my struggles, every private conversation with Dr. Martinez, had it all been reported back to my sister like some twisted intelligence operation? I began paying closer attention during our phone calls home. Rebecca's attacks became more sophisticated, more personal. She'd reference things that only someone with access to my medical records could know: the dosage adjustment in December, my anxiety about taking the medication on an empty stomach, even my concerns about the cost of the prescription. "I just worry about these college kids who keep needing higher and higher doses," she'd say during a family FaceTime call, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's textbook addiction behavior. First they need 20 milligrams, then 30, then 40. Before you know it, they're completely dependent." She was quoting my exact dosage progression from my medical file. The breakthrough came during President's Day weekend when I returned home to Fort Collins for a brief visit. Rebecca had invited her nursing school friends over for a wine tasting, an event I'd normally avoid like the plague. But desperation made me bold. I decided to test my theory with the subtlety of a detective novel. After a few glasses of Pinot Grigio, I casually brought up my amusing college experiences, painting myself as someone finally seeing the light about these dramatic ADHD students. "That 6-hour paragraph thing was so weirdly specific, Rebecca," I said with a giggle, refilling her glass from the bottle she'd spent $40 on. "It's like you have some kind of spy network at universities or something." Her eyes lit up with wine-fueled enthusiasm. Finally, her stubborn little sister was seeing reason, acknowledging the wisdom of her superior perspective. She leaned in conspiratorially, and I discreetly activated my phone's voice recorder, hidden beneath a cocktail napkin. "Well," she slurred slightly, clearly feeling triumphant, "I might have better sources than you think." My heart hammered as she continued, alcohol loosening her usually careful tongue. "Remember Brenda from nursing school? She works at the front desk at your health center now. Small world, right?" Rebecca's smile was predatory. "She recognized your name when you first checked in and started keeping me updated. Just looking out for my little sister, you know." The confession kept flowing like wine from a broken bottle. Brenda had been systematically violating HIPAA laws, accessing my confidential medical records and sharing every detail with Rebecca. My medication changes, my appointment times, my private conversations with healthcare providers, all of it had been transmitted like gossip between two women who saw my mental health as entertainment. "She even told me about you crying at the front desk about reading problems," Rebecca bragged, completely unaware that my phone was capturing every incriminating word. I kept my expression neutral, nodding and smiling while internally planning her destruction. The next few weeks transformed me into a woman on a mission. I'd stumbled onto a gold mine of illegal activity, but I needed more than a drunken confession recorded on my iPhone. Rebecca and Brenda had built their spy network on the assumption that I was too weak, too ashamed, and too dependent on family approval to fight back. They were about to discover just how wrong they'd been. My first stop was the campus legal aid office, where a sharp third-year law student named Jake Chun reviewed my recording with the intensity of a prosecutor examining murder evidence. "This is a massive HIPAA violation," he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "We're talking about systematic privacy breaches, potential criminal charges, and enough civil liability to bankrupt a small hospital." Jake helped me file formal complaints with the Department of Health and Human Services, the Colorado State Board of Nursing, and Denver General Hospital's Compliance Department. Each form felt like loading ammunition into a cannon aimed directly at Rebecca's perfect life. But I wasn't finished gathering evidence. I began documenting every attack, every casual mention of my private medical information, every smug comment about college students and their medication needs. I created a spreadsheet with dates, witnesses, and direct quotes, building an airtight case that would make Perry Mason weep with joy. The most damning evidence came during a family dinner in March. Rebecca, emboldened by months of psychological torture, decided to escalate her campaign with nuclear precision. "Did you know," she announced to our parents over Mom's famous pot roast, "that some of these college drug addicts are so dependent on stimulants that they panic if they miss even a single dose? They'll call their doctors frantically, claiming they can't function, begging for emergency refills." She stared directly at me while describing, word for word, my panicked phone call to Dr. Martinez's office after I'd accidentally left my medication at home during spring break. A call that should have been protected by doctor-patient confidentiality, now being used as dinner-table entertainment. Our parents shook their heads in disapproval while I sat there, my rage burning white-hot beneath a carefully neutral expression. Every detail Rebecca shared dug her grave a little deeper. Meanwhile, the official investigations were gaining momentum. Jake had connected me with a health privacy attorney who specialized in HIPAA violations, a fierce woman named Patricia Rodriguez who'd made a career of destroying healthcare workers who thought patient privacy was optional. "Cases like this are prosecutor gold," she explained during our consultation. "Clear evidence, recorded confessions, systematic violations over months. Your sister and her accomplice are looking at federal charges, permanent license revocation, and civil penalties that could reach 6 figures. The Colorado State Board of Nursing confirmed they'd opened a formal investigation into Rebecca's conduct. The hospital's compliance department launched their own internal review. The dominoes were beginning to fall, and Rebecca had no idea the earthquake was coming. As winter melted into spring, I watched my sister bask in her superiority, completely unaware that her perfect life was about to become a cautionary tale told in medical ethics classes across the country. The only question remaining was when to detonate the bomb she'd helped me build. The explosion came on Easter Sunday, in front of our entire extended family. Rebecca had been planning this moment for months, waiting for maximum impact with the largest possible audience. Our grandmother's dining room was packed with 3 generations of family members, all gathered around the antique oak table laden with glazed ham, deviled eggs, and Mom's legendary lemon meringue pie. The conversation had been flowing pleasantly: Uncle Tom's retirement plans, Cousin Katie's engagement, Grandpa Joe's fishing adventures, when Rebecca struck with the precision of a surgical blade. "Speaking of family updates," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding operating rooms, "I think everyone should know that Hazel has been taking Vyvanse for months now. 30 milligrams of pharmaceutical amphetamines every single day, just to get through her college classes." The dining room erupted into chaos. Mom's face crumpled as if she'd been physically struck, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. Dad's fork clattered against his plate as he processed the implications of his youngest daughter being a drug addict. Grandma Helen, who still believed depression was just laziness in fancy packaging, began muttering prayers under her breath while staring at me like I'd grown horns. "These campus doctors are handing out ADHD diagnoses like Halloween candy," Rebecca continued, her voice rising above the family's shocked murmurs. "They're creating a generation of legal drug addicts who can't function without their pills." Dad's face turned purple with rage. "We're done paying for your education," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal glasses. "If you can't succeed without drugs, you don't deserve our support. Look at your sister, she achieved everything through hard work and discipline." "Pill-popping disgrace," Grandma Helen declared, her words cutting through me like shattered glass. In my day, we called that being weak-willed. The family continued their assault while Rebecca sat back with that perfect nurse smile, savoring her moment of triumph. She'd successfully turned my private medical information into a weapon of mass family destruction, and she was enjoying every second of my public humiliation. They banished me from the table with promises to discuss this later, but I knew exactly what that meant. More shame, more judgment, more psychological warfare designed to break whatever spirit I had left. But as I walked toward the living room, my phone buzzed with a text message that changed everything. Jake Chun, investigation complete. They're moving fast. Brenda was fired this morning. Criminal charges filed. Rebecca's hearing scheduled for Tuesday. Nuclear option is live. I stopped in the doorway, looking back at my family as they continued dissecting my character and questioning my moral fiber. Rebecca was holding court, explaining to everyone how she tried to help me see the error of my ways, how she'd been monitoring my situation out of sisterly concern. She's been getting regular updates from a friend at the health center, Rebecca bragged to Uncle Tom. Just trying to make sure Hazel didn't completely destroy her life with these drugs. Another HIPAA violation, recorded on my phone for posterity. I smiled for the first time all day. Rebecca thought my silence meant shame and submission, but she had no idea that justice was already thundering toward her like an avalanche. The reckoning was less than 72 hours away. Tuesday morning arrived with the swift brutality of divine retribution. I was sitting in my dorm room, supposedly studying for my Renaissance literature exam, when my phone exploded with activity. The first call came from Mom, her voice a mixture of confusion and panic. Hazel, something terrible has happened to Rebecca. The hospital called, they've suspended her pending some kind of investigation. She's hysterical, claiming it's all a misunderstanding. The next call came from Rebecca herself, her typically controlled voice cracking with desperation. Hazel, I need you to help me. Someone filed false complaints against me. They're saying I violated patient privacy, but that's impossible. I would never. I let her voicemail run while Patricia Rodriguez texted me updates in real time. Brenda terminated immediately. Facing federal charges for HIPAA violations. Colorado State Board of Nursing, formal hearing scheduled. License suspension likely. Hospital compliance, internal investigation confirms systematic privacy breaches. Criminal referral approved. U.S. Attorney's Office reviewing case. By Wednesday, the local medical community was buzzing with gossip about the nurse who'd been caught trafficking in stolen patient information. Denver General Hospital, terrified of federal sanctions and massive HIPAA penalties, moved with corporate efficiency to distance themselves from the scandal. Rebecca's termination letter arrived by certified mail on Thursday, along with a legal notice informing her that the hospital would not be providing legal representation for her criminal defense. She was on her own, facing federal charges and professional annihilation. The Colorado State Board of Nursing scheduled an emergency hearing for the following Monday. Patricia Rodriguez explained that license revocation was virtually guaranteed. Healthcare workers who violate patient privacy don't get second chances, especially when the violations are systematic and malicious. But the real justice came from watching Rebecca's perfect world crumble in real time. The medical community is surprisingly small and devastatingly gossipy. Word spread through hospital corridors like wildfire. Rebecca Thompson had been caught sharing confidential patient information with unauthorized persons. Her nursing license was under review. Criminal charges were pending. No healthcare facility would touch her with a 10-foot stethoscope. Within 2 weeks, Rebecca went from being the golden child who saved lives at a prestigious hospital to an unemployable pariah facing federal prosecution. The nursing position she'd worked 7 years to build disappeared overnight, along with her professional reputation, her financial security, and her entire identity. The final blow came when Brenda, facing her own criminal charges, decided to cooperate with prosecutors. She provided detailed evidence of their conspiracy, including text messages, phone records, and a complete timeline of their illegal information sharing. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she threw Rebecca under the bus with the enthusiasm of someone trying to save her own skin. Rebecca's attorney, a public defender, since she could no longer afford private representation, advised her to consider a plea bargain. The federal charges alone carried potential prison time, and the civil penalties could bankrupt her for life. My parents, finally understanding the scope of Rebecca's actions, were devastated. Their perfect daughter hadn't just made a mistake, she'd committed federal crimes while systematically torturing her own sister with illegally obtained medical information. The family hierarchy had undergone a seismic shift, and I was no longer the failure they needed to fix. Rebecca's birthday party in July was meant to be a quiet family affair, a subdued celebration for someone whose life had imploded spectacularly over the previous 4 months. I hadn't been invited, of course. The family was still processing the reality that their golden child was a federal criminal who'd systematically violated her sister's medical privacy for months. But exclusion had never stopped me before, and it wasn't going to start now. I showed up at Mom and Dad's house just as they were lighting the candles on Rebecca's cake, a modest store-bought affair, a far cry from the elaborate celebrations she'd enjoyed in her pre-criminal days. The entire family froze when I walked through their back door like an uninvited ghost of justice past. Rebecca sat at the head of the patio table, looking like a shell of her former self. Her nursing license had been permanently revoked. The federal charges were still pending, though her attorney was negotiating a plea deal that would likely include community service and substantial fines. Most importantly, she was unemployable in healthcare. Her name had become synonymous with HIPAA violations in medical circles throughout Colorado. "Hazel," Dad started, his voice uncertain. The family dynamics had shifted so dramatically that no one knew how to interact with me anymore. I was no longer the failure who needed fixing, I was the victim of systematic privacy violations, and they were still processing the guilt of their complicity. "I hope you don't mind," I said cheerfully, grabbing a champagne flute from the outdoor bar setup. I wanted to make a toast to Rebecca on her special day. The family exchanged nervous glances. Rebecca's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with the kind of panic I'd felt during all those family dinners when she'd psychologically tortured me with my own medical information. I raised my glass high, making sure everyone could see me clearly in the golden afternoon sunlight. "I'd like to make a toast to the birthday girl," I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent patio. "To Rebecca, who's taking a well-deserved break from nursing." Rebecca started to stand, probably planning to escape, but I continued before she could move. "Here's hoping she finds someone willing to hire her again, though I hear that's particularly challenging when you've permanently lost your professional license for sharing patients' confidential medical information." The family's faces shifted from confusion to horror as they remembered exactly how Rebecca had obtained all that detailed information about college students and their medication habits. Mom's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the patio stones. "Some mistakes," I continued, matching the concerned tone Rebecca had perfected during her months of psychological warfare, end careers. "But I'm sure she'll find something suitable eventually. Maybe retail? I hear they're always hiring." Rebecca remained frozen, her birthday cake forgotten, as the weight of her actions finally settled over the entire family gathering. I took a sip of champagne, smiled pleasantly at everyone, and set down my glass. "Happy birthday, Rebecca. I hope this year brings you everything you deserve." And with that, I walked back to my car, leaving them to contemplate the wreckage of the golden child's perfect life, a life she destroyed in her obsession with tearing down mine. Justice, it turned out, tasted even sweeter than Mom's lemon meringue pie.